you're not feeling right, tossing, turning in bed because it's all in your head, go ahead and call on Jesus. He will fix it. You let him fix it. He will fix it. It's much more than emotion, it's more than emotion. I know what it feels like when deep down you're broken inside. You're hoping for some relief in your life, and he told you, I'm right here by your side. He said, be cool because I'm your refuge. I will not fear though the earth be removed. These struggles won't change my order steps. God is my very present help. That's why I know Jesus. He will fix it. I know Jesus. He will fix it. I know Jesus. He will. Jesus, he will fix it for you. He will. I know he will fix it for you. He'll fix it for you. He will. If you let him. He'll fix it for you. If you let him. He'll fix it for you. All you gotta do is just let him. He will. He'll break the chains and release your fetters. He will. All you gotta do is just let him. He will. He'll take the bad and make it all better. He will. All you gotta do is just let him. No need to doubt me, no second guessing. All you gotta do is just let He will. The broken pieces put back together. He will. Now you know that Jesus will fix it.
Word and world, how we thank God for another day that he has blessed us with. This is the day that the Lord has made. We will rejoice and be glad in it. Listen, if you knew all the hassle I just went through to make sure that we could get on this thing, it's ridiculous. This is why we've got to have this kind of conversation. I am joined today by two men that are very dear to my heart, my son, Jonathan Woods, and my nephew, Joshua Matt Clark. I'm going to have them quickly introduce themselves and give you, well, a little bit, I introduced them, give you a little bit more detail about where they are in life, where they're living, what's going on. And then we're going to get into some questions that I think those of us who are seasoned in the Lord, those of us who've been walking with the Lord a long time, who represent in the eyes of a lot of our millennials, the church, I think this is a conversation that's going to help both the old school and the new school, if I could say that. Before we do that, let me offer a word of prayer. Father, we're grateful to you for this opportunity. And we pray to God that in spite of the glitches and all of the things that happens when you're dealing with technology, that the message be heard, the message will be heard, and that people would be helped. We thank you, dear God, for new ways to share your word. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, we'll start with you, Jonathan. Tell us a little bit about yourself, man. What's going on in your world?
What's going on? I'm 23 years old here in Los Angeles, California. In Los Angeles, California, I'm a student. I'm also a community organizer as well as the advocate for the youth here in LA. I do a lot of work with youth, and right now where I'm at in my life is just I'm just trying to grow as a man and try to grow into that connection that I have with God and the connection that God has with my family as well.
All right. J. Mac Jr.
What's up, y'all? I'm Josh, 31, out here in Houston, Texas. I'm a barber, been doing that for a while now. Just raising my son, just trying to do the best that I can, just trying to figure it out as I go along, as we all are, I guess. Just taking it one day at a time, trying to figure out this relationship with God and just trying to do it the right way, I guess. So that's what I'm on right now.
All right. Thank you guys for joining us, man. And thank you for your patience while your uncle tried to get this thing together. See, Pastor Seals, the Lord working on his patience. You saw my eyebrows moving up when we were working. I was working on his nerves. But we're grateful to God for this opportunity. So, man, the questions that you guys have, they're not questions that, we rehearsed. They're questions that you guys have come up with. I think, Josh, you probably took a survey with some of your questions. So let's go at it. And we can start wherever. Josh?
Okay. My first question would be coming from the people that don't know anything about the church or have a relationship with God, or they still have a lot of questions. My first question would be, why God? Why the church? Why the relationship? Opposed to, you know, in the era that we live in now with instant gratification, and you can have whatever you want whenever you want it, and you know, everything is put in front of your face, and there's so many avenues to get what you want. What would be the reason why someone will want to choose God and to walk in that relationship, opposed to what they're already doing in life?
I think that would, I'm going to give you a Bible answer, but let me give you a real practical answer personally. The reason why I've chose God and the God of the scriptures, which we know came in the form and manifested himself, Emmanuel, we see that the God of the scriptures is Jesus Christ, right? So when you say to me, why do I choose God? My response would be, because Jesus, who I believe is God, works for me. And it's what's been working for me. You mentioned about there in Houston being a barber and how that's been working for you. So Jesus is who works for me personally. The scriptures declare, and I think this is an area where the church needs to tighten up in talking more about Jesus as God. Jesus says that I come that you might have life and life more abundantly. Now that life there is not only quantity, eternal life, but it's also quality. I choose Jesus because Jesus makes life better and he makes me better at life. And I don't think there's anything that the world can offer that can make life as better as Jesus can. So that's why I choose Jesus, because he makes life better and he makes me better at life. And that's just not, I was thinking about this today. I think I'm gonna work on a message that Jesus is good for earth too. Because most times when we think about Jesus, we're just thinking about heaven. No, no, no. The Jesus, the God of the scriptures, is good for earth too. So that's why I'll choose God, because he makes life better. He makes me better at life.
Got you. And that is, I don't want to say it, but I mean, I guess you got to, because that's just what's so important, I guess, with people around my age, just young, is how do you separate that feeling, or that piece from the tangibles, from money, from fame, from, you know, women, from, or for the women, for men, or, you know, those desires that you have. How was that separation from those things that can give us that quote unquote peaceful feeling, or that love?
Well, I think that there are two things. First of all, when you start talking about stuff like fame and material things, I don't think a man needs a relationship with God for that. I think those things can be accomplished through hard work and commitment. But I think the question, or the issue, or the challenge is getting all of that stuff, and yet on the inside, there's no peace. You've got all of this stuff, you've got the fame. How many times we see cats who got the fame and the fortune, but yet they're destroying their lives, right? So this relationship with God offers every human being an opportunity to live life to its fullest. Now,
Yes.
that does not include, that don't mean everybody is going to get rich. That doesn't mean everybody's going to have fame. Some of the wealthiest people are people, or some of the wealthiest people that I know are not wealthy in a sense of material gain, but they're wealthy in knowledge. They're wealthy in peace. They're wealthy in character, right?
Gotcha.
So when you talk about how do you separate the two, I think you can have stuff and not Jesus, and life still not be good. But if you got Jesus and you get stuff, then you got a wonderful life, because with Jesus, he's going to help you how to manage that stuff and fix it in your mind, where you will have stuff and stuff won't have you.
Got you.
Jonathan?
Yeah, so my question, obviously, like from my background as a community organizer, I think my question is more stemmed into just the overall view of not only church and religion, but America right now, and what we've been seeing going on with the Black Lives Matter movement and everything, even with COVID. And my question for you would be is, do you believe that the Black church is as progressive as our Black communities and our Black history?
I would have to say, unfortunately, we're not. The Black Lives Matter movement was spearheaded for the first time in as it relates to social justice, and the church didn't take the lead on that. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think the church was and could have been more involved in it, but progressively, no. And I think because one of the challenges we have to overcome in the church, and that is that our commission is to make disciples of Jesus Christ, not of ourselves. What do you mean by that, Bishop Clark? We are not as strong as we should be in social justice, because there are a lot of times we want everybody to agree with everything we stand for. And the truth of the matter is, there are some people who want social justice, as you said, Josh, may not want God, may not want Jesus. Well, if I have Jesus, I'm not going to not work with you because you don't want Jesus. I want to work with you in such a way where you see how attractive having Jesus is, and then give him a try. But I think the problem with the church is that, let me say it this way. We have to realize that being different does not mean we're distant. And a lot of times we are not as progressive with social justice matters because we have decided, because there's a difference in belief, then now we're going to stay away. And that's not Jesus. Always was around people who didn't like him. There were a set of people, Pharisees and scribes, who couldn't stand him, but he didn't avoid them. He dealt with them. And so, and I'm using that to just point out the fact that he didn't run away from people who didn't believe what he believed. So yes, I think the church has a big responsibility now more than ever to be a part of the social justice change, and to be open-minded, with all kinds of people, same gender loving, I said it, Black, white, whatever group there is that's willing to work for the advancement of human rights. I think the church needs to have its hand in, with the love of God.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Josh?
Man, my next question, I'm gonna just go ahead and dive straight into it. So we have an issue now with information being so quick, right? And you can just get on the internet and Google anything and just find out the whole history about it. So within these past few years, people have been getting more knowledge on, relationship and religion and how that things work. And there are some people, when doing the research on Christianity, and there's information that it traces back to slavery, and how slave masters use the Bible, use Bible verses, to not only mentally abuse the slaves, but physically. And that whole controlling aspect of Christianity and the Bible. My question would be, how do you man, how do you let's get the truth on how do you separate what was used to control and what wasn't used to control, or how do you it's hard for me to explain, but how do you separate the two? What can we take and live off of, and understand that this is God's words, this is what he used out of love? Was that just a manipulation tactic? How did that work? And how do we get to the core essence of what the relationship is, or the religion is, or
Josh, so let's first of all, let me commend you for asking the question. And I want you and Jonathan, man, this is what we want. I want to keep it real. So no question is not right, right?
Okay.
They say the only question you shouldn't, the only wrong question is the question that wasn't asked. Right. So let me commend you, first of all, on that question. And then let me say, I like the fact that you said, how do we separate it? Because what you have when you talk about Christianity and you talk about the Bible in the hands of capitalists, in the hands of those who sought to use it for their own gain, is no different than putting some expensive clippers in the hands of a fellow who don't know how to cut. He's bound to mess something up. But it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with the clippers. It's just the problem is with the person whose hand the clippers are in. So when you talk about Jesus Christ and you talk about the scriptures, and you're going to constantly hear me refer to Jesus, because I think Jesus has gotten a bad rap. And those who, I was preaching the other day and I said something that created a little controversy, but it was so true. And that is, we've talked a whole lot about the Bible, but folks say very little about Jesus. When you look at the life of Jesus, nephew, you'll discover love is always doing what's best for someone else. And the truth of the matter is, there is no problem, there is no challenge that when love is at the center of it cannot be overcome. So when I talk about, when you say separating the truth, I think the issue is love. Love is a determining factor whether or not you've got the right Christianity. I'm gonna say it again. Love is the determining factor of whether or not you've got the right Christianity. Now watch this. Any religion that does not teach us how to live well with one another is a religion that cannot have at its core Jesus Christ, because Jesus is all about, and I'm going back to this is my pet phrase, making life better and making us better at life. So when you've got a fella who's saying, well, man, a white man used this and a white man used that, and white man, hey, I'm not saying that Jesus, or rather scriptures have not been taken out of context, and scriptures haven't been misused to abuse people and all of those things. What I'm saying is that's not Jesus, and that's not what Jesus taught. That's not how Jesus lived. In fact, about it, I think we'll do better by interpreting the whole Bible through the lenses of Jesus. But when I'm looking at the Old Testament apart from what Jesus taught, I'm gonna get that kind of foolishness that you're talking about. And you know as well as I know, it don't take much for somebody to take something that's right and twist it and use it for their good. But the core, how do I separate it? I separate it because I'm looking at the teachings of Jesus that produces love, that produces a better life with mankind. And it's unfortunately that hasn't been the Jesus that's been taught.
So how do we change that narrative with Christianity and slavery, with believers in slavery, and for lack of a better term, Christianity seeming soft with the, like, okay, let's just, so like within these last few years, being Muslim has become very popular.
Mm-hmm.
Because, and I want to say because in the wake of Black Lives Matter and the stance that Muslims have on being, structured and firm on what they believe in, and, you know, seeming militant and things like that. People are some people are leaning towards that because of what they stand for and them standing strong for the Black community. So what do you have to say as far as, or how can you help people with understanding that, you know, with their strength within Christianity, you know, it's not as to seem weak or, you know, always turning the cheek and seeming soft, but, you know, stand for something. And how can we put that strength back in there, and kind of try to get away from the slavery and the controlling aspect of it? How do we fix that? Can we fix that if we can?
I think we can fix it. I think it again, and this is really my hard answer, man. I think it's representing Jesus again.
Okay.
Here's Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, and soldiers come looking for him. Judas has betrayed him, and soldiers are now coming and look for him. And the gospel writer says that when they come upon Jesus, Jesus does not run and hide. He says, "You're looking for me? Let them go." That's a man. That's not a weakling. And again, when you ask about how do we correct that, we put the blame where the blame should be. And it's not on Jesus. The blame is on our oppressors. You cannot say and detach Christianity. Now we're talking strictly for those of us who are African American. We cannot detach the scriptures from the truth geographically. That Eden is in Africa. So when people start talking to me about it's a white man's religion, how you gonna be a white man religion and he's a Black man, dark skin, hair was like yours? So I think it's the way we change the narrative is representing Jesus, rethinking Jesus. Stop seeing him as a white, blonde hair, blue eye. No, that's not who he is. He looked like us. He was dark skinned, and not having to use that to do what white folk do now to say we're better. See, there's some of those states that promote social justice and stand for the Black people. They in their own way foster a division that we don't need, because no movement for African Americans in this country has happened solely by the hands of African Americans. There was a whole lot of people helping in Black Lives Matter, and then there was some Muslims. Now, when you talk about Muslims, you got to be mindful, because there are Muslims that Malcolm met in Mecca, and then there are Muslims we see that are part of the nation. Two totally different kinds of style and belief systems there.
Okay.
You follow what I'm saying? So when we talk about Jesus and changing the narrative, I think we do that by representing him differently. Conversations like this. That's why, you know, at Brotherhood, we go to the club and have Brotherhood meeting there, because we want to have people to rethink Jesus. I think that's how we change the narrative.
Awesome. Thank you.
And I would actually like to also like we'll touch on, because it will lead me into another question, but something that I obviously like I said, I have extreme just value for social justice work and community organizing. And I mean, I'm also a very big history buff, and something I've been learning about more in depth is the Black church and the history behind the Black church. And something I was reading today from, I think it was like the Harvard Gazette, was that the Black church in itself, the creation of Black people gathering and worshiping God, was a revolutionary tactic at the time. In like I think it was 1787 in Philadelphia, is when a congregation of the first ever Black community coming together and talk about church was something that was a social justice stance, as we see as a protest now, was even a lot more bigger back then. And slavery, I think, like you said, that Bible was a way for white colonizers to kind of come over to other places and say, hey, you guys have to follow this Bible because this is what we know is true. But I feel like my dad, he said it pretty well, how we can't detach, like we're so caught up in this thought that, you know, Jesus is this oppressor looking like male.
Right.
This is white male who came over, who is deemed to be this hero, but in reality, you know, he's this African American man who was doing what African American men are doing today, you know. And I feel like a big thing that we all kind of have to realize too within the Black community, and it kind of also stems from my first question, is that the Black church in the creation and in the kind of progression as we went up into that stage in the 1960s where we hit the civil rights era and the Black church started being that forefront for the Black community, stepping out, making sure that the Black community was doing these things. The voter registration that we're seeing now, you know, it could be also said that that was Martin Luther King's era in Selma when they did that march. That was a different tactic, different way, but it led to some similar results. But I would say that the Black church in itself, I feel like when we look at churching and religion in a whole, I always associate the Black church with being something not only religious and spiritual, but being something about the community. As in, when you go to a Black church, you're part of a community of people who have been oppressed together in the same social setting. And as they come, for other people, for other, I wouldn't say for all, but for other demographics of people, when they go to church, they're there to repent their sins. They're there to, you know, free their consciousness. But as Black people, when we heal, it's normal that we go into these spaces and we feel like we're healing by ourselves, but that healing that we do internally in church, I feel like represents a bigger heal as we heal as a community. Like I was just talking to my girlfriend, like I remember as a kid, never really understanding, oh, why would I have to wake up at like 8 o'clock in the morning to go to church, put on my Sunday best and everything. But just knowing that as I walked out, that feeling of being like, you know, I don't know what it is that was being said, but I just felt closer to the person. Maybe it was when you're standing up next to your neighbor and you're saying like, neighbor, you're gonna be good. And you're getting that hug throughout the days. Like I've gone to plenty of churches in my time. And I can say that only in Black churches is where you get a place where it's a full healing circle, where you're healing with each other and not so much healing by yourself.
And I think, Jonathan, and let me say something, because you've said something several times, both you and Josh, and I want to be clear. And I think it goes, Josh, to what you were saying in terms of us, how do we change that narrative? I think we have to first understand and be very clear with our terminology. Jesus does not offer a religion. In fact about it, he comes to destroy religion or to do away with religion. He offers a relationship. And what you just talked about, Jonathan, in the context of the Black church, is solely the evidence and the fruit of relationship. When there is relationship, see, religion is a set of rules you follow. Religion is rituals that you practice so that you can satisfy your conscience. But a relationship is what you grow in. You just mentioned your girlfriend and Josh, you with your son. Both of you all have relationships with these individuals, which means you take the good and the bad, which means you grow with them, which means you learn more about each other, right? Because that's a relationship. Jesus offers a relationship. The only difference in that analogy with you and your son, you and your girl, is that he doesn't have to improve, because you can't improve on perfection. So the growth that happens is me with him. The more I grow, the more I understand. And that growth is not a life of perfection. It's a life of progress. So when you talk about the experience within the Black church, Jonathan, you're exactly right. Healing does take place, because what I have with Jesus, what you all have with Jesus, is not a religion, it's a relationship.
Yeah, and I would say, well, and then going off to that relationship, that actually makes, it brings it together, and I feel like it ties it in really nicely. But my next question for that would be, within this relationship that we make in the church, how can we kind of mirror that into our communities that lack a lot of different resources, not just food, but we're talking about resources and now mental health, which is being a very big predominant thing that's ravaging our Black community, and other things as well. As we start seeing, as Josh said, we have these instant gratifications that are going around, but how can we kind of circle back to reflect the church's values in our own communities without telling people that it's all just about praying? Because I feel like it's gotten to a point where my generation, at least, is to a point where, we've heard our grandparents pray, we've heard our parents pray, and I feel like our prayers we're afraid of our prayers shadowing what our parents and grandparents have been through. Some of us still seeing that struggle. So we're seeing kind of, we're like, where's that end line? How can we help boost our community through church?
I think the word is collaboration. You see, I think there's some things, and I see this a lot here in Oakland. There's some things that the church has got to let other nonprofits do. I'm more clear on that than ever before. And I think somewhere down the line, we got into this bidding with resources that we lost purpose and agenda. You see, the only thing the church offers the world that it cannot get anywhere else is Jesus. So when you say, how does the church work back through the community? By having young brothers as yourself who's dealing with a nonprofit that helps mentoring you. Now the church comes along, partners with you, brings in volunteers, shares some of its resources, opens up some of its facilities. You see what I'm saying? So now there's collaboration as opposed to the church just wanting to do it all. And then there's somebody else across town doing the same thing. We can't win the world like that. There has to be collaboration. So I think those organizations that are doing those things in a community, the way the church can impact it is by supporting it. It's by, I never shall forget, I read this article where there was a huge protest going on behind something, I want to say was either abortion or something else going on. And there was a church that showed up in the midst of the protest, and there were people who were protesting for this. And it was something that the church normally would not be bothered with or would have shunned. But this church showed up and was giving those who were opposing what they believed, giving them water, making sure that they had what they had. Now, these protesters are going against what the church stands for, but it didn't stop the church from loving. I used that story, or tried to paint that picture to bring out the point that there has to be collaboration. That's the role the church plays in this season. We have to partner with those nonprofits and say, hey, we are here for support. When that begins to happen, I think we're going to see a huge change. It's going to be a huge change. We don't have to run it to be a part of it.
So, so as you answered that question, that helps lead into the next question, which is, and it's not a long, just a quick. So with all that being said, is there an aggressive position for the church to have as far as I guess spearheading this Black Lives Matter, or not even Black Lives Matter, but just a community or some type of what's the word I'm looking for, to just kind of spearhead this movement? Is there a position for the church in that? I know you said we can't put everything on the church, but we say that, but like Jonathan said, when you go back to the church being the cornerstone of the community, and we go back to the Martin Luther Kings and those people that when we kind of went to the church for everything, You know, we went
Yeah.
there to, you know,
Yeah.
kind of help with everything.
Yeah.
And so if we can't go for everything, then with these times, just because, you know, with the police brutality and everything, and it's so much information being out there, and everybody is just so driven to fix this issue that we have with police and economics and things like that. What role can the church play in that, as far as still being that cornerstone for that?
Well, I think that there are two things I think we have to consider. First of all, there was a time the church did everything because the church was the only thing we had, right? So the church started colleges and church. I mean, you're right. It was the cornerstone because that's all we had, right? But it was never meant to be all we had. So from that, we did different things. So out of the church, civil rights movement and all of those things. So the church, I think, still gives its support and becomes a foundation in the sense of its gathering and connecting and bringing us together, not just as a Black people, but as a community, right? Just as it's a community, because when you start talking about police brutality, and I think this is one, and I'm gonna get in trouble for saying this, but I think one of the mistakes we make when we talk about that is we just limit it to just a certain group of people. But police brutality, Hispanics are dealing with that, right? So it's a serious issue. So when we talk about, when you mentioned about what role the church can play and how does the church, I think the church brings the teachings of Jesus that talks about love, and that's not a weak love. See, that's why we got to change the narrative. When you say love, we thinking, oh, don't let, no, man. No. Love is not just pampering. Love is perfecting. It ain't always tender. Sometimes it's tough, right? Sometimes that love brings about reproof. Sometimes that love brings about chastisement. So the church, I think, to everything that is for the advancement of people, should bring to it the teachings of Jesus. Love talks about the unity, the foresight and understanding. You got problems in every organization. Well, if the church is a part of it, the church can use the teachings of Jesus to solve those problems among people who are part of that organization. So I think the church plays a role in it all, but I think the church has to be the church in it. You find what I'm saying? And that's okay. It's okay that there are other organizations other than the church doing things for the community.
Gotcha.
It's perfectly fine that there are other nonprofits or for-profits that are doing things to advance the agenda of civil rights and Black lives. I think that's fine. I think the church needs to collaborate and not try to control.
Gotcha.
And I think for so long, that's what has happened. And people have looked for that.
Yeah.
Well, that actually gives me an idea of a question that I kind of had written down earlier, but I kind of crossed off a little bit. But it's more about the inclusiveness of our churches and our church settings, and how when we walk into a church, you know, sometimes it's always a welcoming place, but then I feel sometimes it could be something that's so exclusive too in the Black community. I don't know if you get me what, but yeah, just like growing up and going to church, and I mean in all churches, you know, like when you go, people expect you to look a certain way. Like I said, when I was a kid, you woke up and you went to church and you were to put on your Sunday best, or you would have looked presentable, you know. But I always kind of struggle with that inclusiveness onto church, because also, you know, I would have always thought like these people who do need church are these people who don't have what they have. I feel like everybody for sure needs their relationship with God, but I guess my bigger question is kind of I'm trying to just think of the word I'm trying to look for. But I'm guessing trying to ask is, how can we kind of separate the church from the norms that have kind of been created to this point of a lot of people being chosen or going to church. Like I was talking to a friend of mine earlier, saying going to church is sometimes seen as a political statement when you go. Like it could be depending on the type of person you are. And a lot of people would say, you know, beg to differ, but I would also say, you know, in this country alone, we've also made the Black Lives Matter movement a political statement, you know? So I'm guessing, I'm trying to say is how can we expose our Black churches and expose our relationship with God to be more inclusive towards everybody else, not only people who align our spirituality with ours, but people who choose not to align our spirituality or their spirituality with ours? Or how can we, you know, just in that aspect, I feel like same thing with information. There's so much information going on around that, you know, minds change, opinions change so often that people just feel so defensive about what they think that when anybody tries to challenge it, you're always just, somebody's just like, now you're attacking me. But how can we create a church, I guess a church setting where it's a more inclusive place where you can come in without judgment? And I feel like that's more with a community base, because I know God doesn't really pass judgment onto those that seek out a relationship with him. But I feel like it's also part of the community thing, if you get what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
No, I think you're right. I think again, you know, when you view Jesus as one who offers relationship, then anything that is taught or practiced that is not inclusive of everybody cannot fall under the teachings of Jesus Christ. For God so loved the world, that's inclusive. Love your neighbor as you love yourself, that's inclusive. So I think when we are literally and intentionally living out the teachings of Christ, I think it's going to answer all of those problems. And I say that, and here's the crazy part about it, nephew. Here's the crazy part about it, son. Jesus has been misrepresented so bad until people don't even think he taught stuff like that.
Yeah.
They don't even, it doesn't even cross their mind that Jesus was speaking up for the oppressed and speaking truth to power. He shattered the whole religious and political system. He didn't die a religious death. Had he died a religious death, he'd have been stoned. He was crucified. That's a political death. He died in execution. That's the Jesus of scriptures, who was for social justice, who stood up, but he's not presented that way. And he's not presented that way because to be presented that way is going to force us, Jonathan, to go outside of our comfort zone. It's going to force us to see the good in people and not the bad. It's going to force us to not just point a finger, but lend a hand. And a lot of times we don't want the responsibility that comes with a relationship with Jesus Christ. That's why I wanted us to have this conversation. That's why I'm grateful for questions that you all are discussing and talking about, right? And I want it to be heard and understood that all of this has to tie back to Jesus. Once you have a relationship with Jesus Christ, and you follow his teaching, then it's going to cause you to be inclusive. It's going to cause you to want to embrace people when you follow the teachings of Jesus Christ. Listen, here we are. I'm on my back porch. It's dark. Jonathan, you are there in Los Angeles. Josh, you're there in Houston. And we're having a conversation that Shields will edit and all of that, and we'll air it Sunday, talking about this issue. Literally, what I'm sensing based on your questions is, how is Jesus relevant in this day and time? And I'm suggesting that he is more relevant now than ever before. But the problem is folk ain't been talking about him right. So now there are people who don't want to mess with Jesus because they didn't heard folk who said they know Jesus talk wrong about Jesus. But I think conversations like this get things started. I think conversation like this puts things in the perspective that they need to be so that we can move forward. And church as we know it changed. We're doing church different now. We're doing church different right now. This is Sunday morning. We recorded this Tuesday night. We're doing church different right now because Jesus is as relevant today as he's ever been, perhaps even more.
This is helping out a lot because, you know, working in a barbershop, man, and I'm sure y'all know, man, y'all been in a barbershop before. I'm talking about you just get off the wall questions. And when you go back to talking about the information, I mean, literally, somebody will ask you a question and you can go on Google and look up anything you want to know about that question. And you can get years and years and years of research. So
yeah,
when you get to talking about like just the church and God, and when I can go on the internet and I can look up any information I want about God, and then keep in mind, we're talking about people that are all over their place with thinking. I'm talking about, so it's people are impressionable and they take information in, and so they come in the barbershop and they hit you with all these facts and da 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 da. And so it's good that we are having these conversations because people need a clear-cut understanding of what God is, what the church is offering to people, and what this relationship about God, what is it really all about? Because truth be told, I think sometimes from believers with this information, it can kind of get distorted because, like, let's just say me, case in point, if I'm in the barbershop and I'm speaking from faith, now you hit me with a whole bunch of facts in the back of my mind. When I go home, I'm gonna be like, man, you know what? 1 + 1 is 2.
Now, watch this, nephew. No, finish your thought, because I got a response for that I'm just excited I get to say it in this context.
Yeah. So it's when you get that information, you get all these facts, and you like, okay, man, that is true, and that did happen, and this did happen, and you know, like I was reading something today, man, and it was like, God didn't part a Red Sea, like how, like, and they just start going with all this scientific facts of how it's impossible to part a Red Sea, and donkeys don't talk, snakes don't talk, and I'm talking about they just running out the facts to the point to where I'm sitting here reading it, I'm like,
Ooh, nephew,
they right,
nephew.
and so I had to get off it, and I had to close it down to be like, God, you know, I know the truth, and I just had to go put my mind on something else. But I'm saying all that to say it's that simple and it's that quick. And when you got young people or people that's new to this relationship, man, it's easy to get thrown off. And you like, you know what, man, I'm going with the facts. But now, I think that's the day we're living in. We're living in, give me facts. I want to see where it started, what's going on in the middle, and how it ended. And if you can't give me that, then it's hard to believe in. So,
and that is, you are exactly correct. Now watch how we go back to Jesus. Man, my relationship, and let's really, because we're all followers of Jesus Christ, let's call God how we understand him to be through scriptures, and that Jesus, right? God in the flesh. Because I don't want to not say his name. My relationship with Jesus is not predicated on whether or not God split a sea. That ain't why I'm saved. I'm not saved because the world, perhaps science would say, wasn't flooded. That was just a section if that happened. No, my relationship with Jesus is based upon proven facts that there's a man that lived at the time scriptures say he lived. And when I say scriptures, I'm talking about the gospel. Luke's writing, Matthew writes, John writes, and there is factual proof that these are manuscripts that existed during the time Jesus did. My relationship with Jesus, or my relationship, is predicated on what Jesus did. So I interpret scriptures from the lens of Jesus. I'm not trying to prove whether or not Jonah got swallowed by a whale. That's not what my relationship is predicated on. I believe in Jonah because Jesus said something about Jonah. I believe in Adam and Eve because Jesus said something about it. You follow what I'm saying? And anytime, in the words of Andy Stanley, if a man can predict his death, talk about his death and predict his resurrection and pull it off, then I'm gonna rock with him. So when people go to talking about those things, well, man, you don't, because that ain't where your faith is.
Yeah.
Your faith is in the person. And when you look at now watch this here. When you look at every religion that has some substance to it, whether it's Muslim, Judaism, Buddhism, whatever you get at the core, I promise you, you'll find the teachings of Jesus, because he makes every religion. Now, you know, he got to be the right one if everybody got to talk about it. So when I hear stuff like that, I'm not swayed with that. And I would say to those who are watching, you don't have to defend the Old Testament. You don't have to explain and try to win an argument with things about prophecy and revelation. No, your relationship is predicated on what Jesus did. You live your life predicated on what Jesus taught. And we who are followers of Jesus look at scriptures through the lens of Christ, because you can't go wrong with him. That's why he's got to be presented right. That's why he's got to be presented right. You know, if people say, well, man wrote the Bible, which I think is a really foolish argument, because anything you read, somebody wrote it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You follow what I'm saying? And all of those facts that come up across the internet, there's a level of faith that has to believe that, because you wasn't there when that happened.
Right.
You don't know if the guy who recorded this is recording this accurate. You have no proof of that. But you know it works when you try it.
Yep. That's good. That's good. I'm talking about that. That's probably the number one issue I get when I get in debates with people, or you know, when they just want to get to throwing all the information out, you know, and well, how could you read a Bible that's been wrote 3, 4, 5 different times, you know, by da 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 people, you know, and he wrote this and this was taken out and this was manipulated. And I think that scares a lot of people, honestly. I think that scares a lot of people.
It's for good conversation, you know, it's for good debate, but it's just a distraction.
Yeah.
It's a distraction from getting to the core oftentimes of what the issue is. And that is, where are you at in relationship with this eternal being? And how is that proving, whatever you believe in, how is that helping you live better with people? Because a lot of stuff that's taught today helps people better themselves, but it doesn't help people better themselves so that they can be better people for other people. Goes back to your point, Jonathan, about community. And anything that you're being taught that brings about division, that ain't healthy and it ain't holy. And that ain't Jesus.
For me, I guess for the next part of my question, or the next question I have for you, kind of goes back to what Josh was saying, how we're living in a day and age now where it's just like, we want the facts. Like, I come from that generation. I think you had said earlier, millennials. I think for me, it's like Gen Z. So like the one right after. So that's like, I'm in the forefront of like the social media stage. And that's what my generation goes through the most. Like, we're seeing every single thing at the touch of your hands. Like, you can get anything at any time really now. But I guess for like people who are wanting to create that relationship with God and kind of having to figure out the importance of what a relationship with God really intends. And I feel like right now a lot of people are very lost in the sense of like we're missing community, or we're missing other type of resources, and people who probably don't know God would go into these settings and automatically praying like I think I've seen on Instagram and everything, like friends praying for money or friends praying for success. And I feel like as a pastor, do you think that there's something that, at least now in our day and age, that maybe religion or spirituality can't fix? And
That's a good question.
yeah, and if there is something, like how do you as a pastor, how do you portray that to your people who come in and worship with you? Like, how do you talk about that? How do you let people know, like, like there's some issues, and I would say nowadays, like my issues with driving, like I tell kids that I work with, like, sometimes it's anxiety for me to get into a car and drive somewhere. So how can God help me with that? Or how can I help myself with that? Or how can I differentiate what God can help me out with and what I kind of have to go on my own?
Well, where there's relationship, there's responsibility. And I'm intentionally constantly coming back to Jesus. I'm doing that on purpose. I'm doing that on purpose because I think he's the answer. And I'm not just saying that to be cliches. I really am. That when he's presented right, he's irresistible and he changes our lives. You made mention about three things. You named money, you named anxiety, and then I think the third one you mentioned was success, something along those lines. How can the church help with that? Wherever there's relationship, there's responsibility. I think the problem the church has is that we've taken it upon ourselves to teach stuff apart from the teachings of Christ. So you got this health and wealth, prosperity kind of preaching where people are taught that if you just give all of this money, then you're going to get all that money. And at the end of the day, the only person who got the money was the person who was asking for it. What I'd like to do in my approach when I'm dealing with people who have those kind of concerns, I'd like to be honest and straight with them. Let's take money. People who have money are people who make it and manage it, whether lost or not, whether saved or unsaved. People who have money are people who make money and who manage money. Not just people who make it, because you can make it, but not manage it, right? So I look for teachings from Christ throughout scriptures that deal with how we should manage money, would deal with ways in which money can be used and not abused. That's a way I would do that. And that's found, guess where? In the teachings of Jesus Christ. Where man's treasury is, that where his heart will be. Give, and it shall be given unto you. What man goeth to build a house, but doesn't count the cost? All of those are things found right in the teachings of Jesus that we don't look for because, again, Josh, we've got the wrong narrative. Anxiety. Bible talks about praying, meditation. And that's another word. When Christians hear meditation, they think something, crazy and off of the Richter. Not so at all. The Bible talks about meditation. Those kind of things can help with anxiety. When we talk about, I think you said success, putting in work, discipline, people who set their goals and strategize and walk in discipline can achieve a level of success. All of those are things that the scriptures teach that if they are taught in their context and right, can help people with those things.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
I want to throw that in there real quick. Well, since we're talking about that was a good point, Jonathan, that you made up about, like, is there an area that prayer like can't reach to, like can't fix? And I think that's big for I mean, of course, you working with the youth, I'm pretty sure you come into it a lot where, I mean, bro, you just got kids who just, I'm talking about one parent in the household, you know, trying to figure out where the meal gonna come from, you know, they wearing the same clothes, they getting teased. And it's kind of like, you can't just tell this little boy keep praying. You know what I mean? You can't, when he going to school getting bullied and picked on, and you know he's depressed and he's going through all these emotions, and you just like, well, come to church. And so with these kids, it's kind of like, what are you doing to help me with my current situation now? You know, I gotta go home and make my own dinner because my mama's strung out. You know, certain just situations like that where, what do you tell a kid like that? What do you tell a father who can't find a job? You know, and he got 2-3 kids that he trying to make it work for, and he trying to do his best, and they keep telling him no. And you just, you know, hey, just come to church, brother. You know, well, how do you?
I think the first thing I think needs to be defined, and again, it goes back to how we've had this narrative, a relationship, and that's what I'm talking about. Religion would have you think prayer is a magic wand. Religion would have you think if you come to a church building, then all of your problems are going to be solved. That's not relationship. That's not what Jesus stood for. That's not what Jesus taught, right? Prayer is our talking to God as a father, making our requests, trusting that he is going to provide. That doesn't mean I don't work. It doesn't mean that after I say amen, I ain't got some actions I have to do. I'm praying and asking God for a job. I got to get up and go look for one, right? When it comes down, you're talking about the kid who's got to fix his meal. And I could tell that was a nice preacher run too you had going. The kid got to fix his meal. The guy can't find a job and he got mouths to feed. Let's deal with the harsh reality. Whether he has Jesus or not, that's the plight in his life. There can be some people who are Hindus who dealing with them problems.
Right. Yeah.
Those are issues and challenges in life, right? Religion would say, just come to church, pray, and it's going. No, but a relationship, as Jesus modeled and teaches it, means that there's some place of responsibility. So I would say to that brother, who everywhere he's went and they've turned him down, I would want to talk to him to see what skills he has, to see what talents he has, because maybe no from them means he has to say yes to his own self and start a business. And then I would come back and teach him from scriptures that in starting your business, there's a level of discipline that you're going to have to do and a level of sacrifice you're going to have to go through if you want this to work. All of that's taught through the teachings of Christ. I would say to that child who has to go home and fix meal, I would want to make sure that they have something to eat. I would want to connect with some child service, social services, to kind of get that child some help. That's all in relationship. No, religion ain't gonna do that. And a lot of times what people are talking about, nephew, what people are talking about, son, is religion. But Christ didn't come to give a religion. He came to offer relationship. And relationships means that there's some work involved. You see, Dr. King said, for you to pray and for you to pray to God and think you do nothing is not faith, but superstition. Faith without works is dead. So if I'm believing this, then my behavior is going to model that. And I think a lot of times, again, got to change the narrative, because the narrative has been that it's a pie in the sky, you know, let me just go. And that's why when people come to church and they try to be consistent and they, you know, hear a sermon and try to treat people right and it don't work, now they won't quit on God, because they weren't trying to go after a relationship. They were looking for an arrangement.
Yeah.
Right? They were looking for an arrangement. Truth of the matter is, man, you come to Jesus in this relationship, and your credit is jacked up, it's a 450. Guess what it's going to be after you receive Jesus Christ? 450. The difference is now you've got somebody who can help you. You've got somebody who's with you and in you that works on your mind so your mind can think right when you're going through those seasons. So the brother who doesn't have a job without Jesus and the brother who doesn't have a job with Jesus, the brother with Jesus got a better chance of making it. Why? Because he's got somebody to help him with his mind. With a fellow without Jesus, without a relationship, he's going to do whatever he has to do, which most times is going to involve him hurting himself or somebody else.
Question right here. And my last question, I think, is more going to be kind of for, I would say, the overall, like, I think because we had talked about it a while back, and we talked about, the experience of church, like when you're walking into a church Sunday morning, and you've talked about how you wanted to, bring in something a little different for people to kind of experience that, use that experience. So for my last question, I want to ask you, what is a way that you think that can get people such as like Gen Zers, millennials, and even the older folks, how can we kind of make church a setting where it's not just we're sitting down and, it's like we're sitting down healing, but we're also kind of still a little distant, like we're focused, but how do you think we can change, I guess, the overall experience? I'm trying to say the overall experience of going to church, because like I said, as a kid, going to church was, I'd wake up 9 o'clock in the morning, or maybe even earlier than that, like 6, 7 o'clock in the morning. And then you get dressed and everything. And as a kid, you're sitting there and you're watching, your parents and everybody just listen. And even as I got older, like I got more into listening, but I always thought to myself, it's like, what else is there that we can do? Like, I think you had said how you had chicken and waffles, that on Easter Sunday or a service like that. So
with mimosas. Now, can't forget the mimosas.
But I would, because like spirituality nowadays, it's so like it's same, like we keep going back to social media and spirituality. You can go through spirituality and get some shade, and all that. And that's what I've been doing too. I believe in Jesus and the Bible, but I also believe in, those natural remedies that, came from our motherland. So how do you think we can incorporate those two together? Because I feel like with
That's
church,
a good question.
Yeah, I feel like church within our country, especially with the Black church, I feel like so many people feel connected to it who are African American. But once you do start to, envelop in your African heritage, you're kind of seeing like, well, they did, like the colonizers who brought me over here did take out a whole religion that I felt like I'm missing. So how can we kind of, combine those two to kind of make like this new culture and this, kind of advance what Black church is, not only to what it used to be, but how we can see it in the future?
I think one of the ways we can do that is distinguishing, is allowing people to worship, embrace, fellowship in ways that are comfortable for them. One of the things I'm learning to appreciate more and more about Jesus and his teachings is that Jesus works everywhere. He works everywhere.
Yeah.
He works everywhere. And I think we've grown accustomed within the Black culture, particularly the Black church, that, there are only a few ways we can worship him, right? Pentecostals say you got it this way. The Baptists say you got to do it this way. Methodists say you do it this way. And, you got all. But I think what you just said, man, if it's because it's a relationship, then how I express my love for this person I'm in a relationship is going to be based upon my understanding. It's going to be based upon my culture. It's going to be based upon my context of life. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Well, one of the things I want to do as we move, and I think the challenge becomes a lot of times, and I want to overcome this, I want to push this I want to get rid of it. I'm trying to say it in a more loving way, but I think this is some of the stuff that we need to do away with. What's that, Bishop? Allow young people, and y'all got to help me with the millennials, and then it's the what? What is it?
It's millennials, and then you got Gen Zs.
And Gen Zs, allowing them to express their love for Jesus Christ in a way that's conducive for them, whatever that looks like. Because as long as you're talking about Jesus, the rest don't matter. And I think the church needs to free itself so that we can come together, or the youth can come together, the Gen Zs and the millennials can come together to express, to worship, to enjoy Jesus in a context that's suitable for them. And that's not going to look like just the way me and your dad had church. That's not going to look like, Jonathan, the way you and your when you went to church. It shouldn't look that way. Yeah. And you shouldn't want it to look that way. It needs to have your stamp of approval on it. So maybe in y'all church or in y'all gathering, there's an opportunity for you to explore various ways of expressing that's true to your personality. And we got to be okay with that and not thinking somebody just, then fell off the wall or doing some hokey pokey spooky stuff. No, man. So I think it's allowing people to be themselves. That's what I think. It's allowing people to be themselves.
That's good. That's good. And it's and just to piggyback off that, it's kind of like, and Jonathan, I don't know, maybe you can agree with this. It's kind of like if the church doesn't catch up to this generation of kids now, it's like the gap is so big, bro. It's like if the church does not catch up to where these kids are now, like it's gonna miss them. Because I'm even seeing it with my son. These kids are so smart. Like I'm talking about super smart to where they're being innovative and they're thinking of new ways and how can we do this, and how can we get into politics and how can we do this and how can we do this, and it's like that relationship religion is it's not even in a thought right now because it's so much the youth is looking at the world like it's so much that we have to pick for ourselves now because of everything that's going on with the Black community and the police brutality. The youth is so much, what can we do for self now? And so it's kind of like the church got to catch up with that. Like Jonathan brought up a few questions ago, the church has to catch up with what can we do for self now? Because that new generation that's coming up, that's what they focused on. They're back on getting the empowerment back in the Black hand, getting the Black dollar back in rotation, getting, schools, getting all of this stuff Black. So the church has got to catch up to being more innovative. And, I think, Kurt Franklin did a good job of doing that song with Lil Baby. Just getting our young, hot artists that all the kids are listening to and kind of trying to bridge that gap a little bit and kind of like letting the youth know, like, we hear you, we understand. And to get a young artist that y'all look up to and to kind of present it to y'all that, hey, he does understand. We gotta get that connection because the connection was there when I was younger because I grew up in the church and, my mom and my grandma and that, but it's getting further and further removed because for one, grandparents are getting a lot younger, parents are getting a lot younger. So that foundation that was once set with my grandparents is becoming smaller and smaller and smaller. And so kids are trying to find their own, I guess, lack of a better word, strength now other than church. Like, where can we find it within us? So,
and I think that I think with that, nephew, we have to remember that when you say, what can I do for self? When you're in a relationship, it's not about what you can do for self. It's about what you can do for us.
Right.
It's just not you. There's an S on the end when you're talking about relationship. right?
Right.
I think, and that may be, I think that's where the challenge is, because when you lose sight that it's just not about you, when you lose sight of that, then I don't care what you accomplish, eventually things get worse, because selfishness, and when I say selfishness, I'm talking about when you are just trying to empower you and not empower community. When that happens, then destruction is inevitable. I think the way that we change it is by guys like yourselves who are growing in this relationship, who are learning more about the Jesus of scriptures, you guys communicating that in your language, in your world, based upon your own experiences with Jesus. What happened is that there was a disconnect, and the generation stopped sharing the truth, and we started sharing our tradition. We lost, in my opinion, young people, because we stopped telling young people about Jesus, and we started pushing on young people our own preferences and our own traditions and our own ways. And if you didn't do it that way, then you were wrong. But whether it's technology, whether it's social media, I think all of those things should be used to, all of those tools, let me say it this way, all of those tools can be used to tell others about Jesus. Now, I've had my day and time when I would go through all of the debates and argue this person this and run through it. I realize, and Paul talks about this in one of his letters, it's useless. Man, I'm not trying to get you to understand nothing other than Jesus and what he taught. And I can bring that in any context. You and Jonathan, Josh, have the ability to take the message of Jesus and articulate it in a way that they would understand it. And sometimes that's going to use language that you won't hear in a Sunday school class normally.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's going to be in a setting that they're not going to, where it's not churchy.
Wow, that was a great conversation, and we're going to do more of that. I just wanted to leave this thought with you. For those of us who are followers of Jesus Christ, we've got a relationship. We also have a responsibility. And that responsibility is to intentionally make sure our young people know Jesus. Our responsibility is to make sure our young people know Jesus. So let's not be concerned about how they look. Let's not be consumed with how they wear their hair and whether or not they've got tattoos or earrings or how even they choose to wear their pants. Let's get them to know Jesus. And some of the stuff that we are concerned about, if we get them to know Jesus, we may just see the change we've been praying for. If we've got a relationship with Jesus, then our responsibility is to make sure our children know Jesus. Not our church, but our Christ. I love y'all. Until next time, remember, you're alive, you're important, and by God's grace, you're changing. Peace.
I believe it. All the dreams inside of you, and don't stop achieving, yeah. Let God's love shine on through, and with no condition, He's always with us. No excuses, just keep on moving. I am troubled, yet not distressed, perplexed, but not